And welcome you all to our NASEO Buildings Committee meeting on energy savings performance contract, lessons from the field, and the role of owners' representatives. This is also the second installment of our newly launched Public Buildings Collaborative. And I'll go ahead and share some screen to display the slides that I have to tee us all off. Hopefully that's coming through okay. To just set the stage a bit about the Public Buildings Collaborative in case you're joining us for the first time. We had our launch this past Tuesday with our quarterly Buildings Committee meeting. And essentially, this discussion series has a few objectives. First and foremost, to provide a forum for state energy offices to come together and discuss programs to support energy efficiency and electrification of MUSH market and community serving buildings. We'll primarily focus today on funding and financing solutions within this scope. And then we'll also, as other objectives for this collaborative, kind of discuss how these programs can best align with and prepare for future federal incentives. And we'll also have, as you can see, a number of additional stakeholders on the line to kind of connect across these ideas and to learn from. So some guiding questions that I want to pose to our audience today, and this will be a pretty free-flowing discussion led by Chris Anderson, but some questions just for you all to think through as we hear from our presenters and through their specific case studies today is about the uptake of ESPC in your state, your office's role in administering the program, and notably if the program is housed separately from your office, since that is the case across some states. If you have any anecdotes on success stories or challenges that you've come across, as well as whether your office engages owners' representatives as part of your program. So with that, I'll pass things over to Chris to facilitate the rest of our session today. Chris, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Jasmine. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Anderson. I'm the Director of Energy Resources here in the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, which is the state of Georgia's energy office, and joined by a really good panel here this afternoon. And we're going to have a couple of really good presentations and then should have plenty of time for some Q&A as well. We have George Buchanan, who's the founder and CEO of 2KB Energy Services, as well as Natasha Shah, who's the Vice President of Government Strategy at the National Association of Energy Services Companies. Before we get to them, I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about what we have going on here in Georgia and kind of the way our performance contracting program works and some initiatives that we're working on. So we have about a 15-year experience with performance contracting here in our office in Georgia. Back in 2010, we became one of the last states in the country to legally allow the adoption of performance contracting for state agencies. And that came about through a process with the legislature, and it actually took a constitutional amendment for the state. And the reason why we couldn't do it previously at the state level was that state agencies couldn't take on multi-year debt in order to finance performance contracts for energy and water saving projects. So we had a constitutional issue there. The legislature was able to deal with it. And as part of that process, they wrote our office into the law as being the program manager for the program within the state for any state agencies that want to take on performance contracts. And as part of that, we had to go through a long process of developing standard policies and procedures, contracting templates, a pre-qualified pool of ESCOs, a pre-qualified pool of lenders, and we're tasked with certain responsibilities like actually having to sign off on any performance contract before it's executed. So we have legal responsibilities, and we've developed that program over the years, and it's fairly robust now. We're still always looking for ways to improve and grow it, and certainly there's room for opportunity there. Um, but at this point, we have done about eight state agency performance contracts for total contract value across those of getting close to 100 million now. In a typical year, due to the work that we've implemented in those eight projects within state agencies, we're saving over $10 million a year in energy and water and operational savings within the state. So, while we're not the biggest program out there, we've got a pretty well-defined structure for our program, and we've had pretty good uptake, and we've got a couple more big projects that are in the works today, that we're hoping to get across the finish line here in the next couple of months. So we've had, I think, a pretty good amount of success establishing that structure and getting word out to state agencies about how they can participate in the program. And all state agencies have to participate if they're going to do a performance contract, have to work their way through our program. So it's kind of a defined and controlled process within the state, which is different from some states I know. Um, some things that we're actively working on beyond the two projects that are currently underway that I just mentioned. We've long had a long interest in um, how we can support local governments in performance contracting in the state. State law doesn't allow us to have any authority over local government projects, which is fine. But we've wanted to figure out ways that we can support local governments to do more projects, to do better projects, to minimize risk in those projects, et cetera. And one of the ways that we've identified and are in the process of moving forward with is to bring on owner's rep consulting services through our office and then utilize that as technical assistance for local governments across the state, especially for local governments who need the assistance the most. So thinking smaller to mid-size local governments who don't have as many in-house resources when it comes to facilities management and engineering and finance, et cetera. So we're in the process of getting that launched right now, and I'm really excited about that effort and seeing where that goes. And I would really like to see part of our portfolio within the energy office allow for continued higher level support for local governments in the performance contracting space. And one of the reasons we came to that is we have um, a pretty good history in our program of engaging owners reps and bringing them on through our office on many occasions and using them to support the development of state agency projects during procurement, during the investment grade audit phase, and design of the project and measurement verification and so on. So we've worked with a handful of them. And I think they bring a lot of value to the process, and I think they've really improved our projects and helped us minimize risk. So, looking forward to hearing further comments on that note from George as well this afternoon. So, with that, that's kind of our overview and brief history in performance contracting in the state of Georgia and to really kind of think about it from a bigger level. I'm going to hand it over to George with 2KB, and then after George, we'll hand it over to Natasha, and then I get into some Q&A. So with that, George.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Let me share the slide deck here. Happy to be with you all this afternoon. Was going to say morning and start over, but who wants that? Not me. So yeah, I'm going to talk about sort of bringing owners reps into the process, but more so just sort of step back. And a lot of this will be stuff that you all have already heard with uh, how performance contracts are supposed to work. You know, we'll talk about some of those, as you see here, best practices in measurement verification performance assurance. Again, I'm George Buchanan, CEO and founder of 2KB Energy Services. 2KB is a special project management firm focused on efficiency, decarbonization, sustainability, and of course, ESPC owners rep projects. So great to be here with you. Um, Look, I realize, as I talk about some of these things, we say best practices for state agencies and even local governments, K-12. Everyone's their own unique special snowflake, right? And so, particularly on the state side, some of the areas where we talk about, for example, where this policy or this best practice may apply, there's certainly going to be limitations or, again, unique circumstances that your state has where some of this may or may not fit for your model. But in general, and I think again, I'll breeze through some of this because I think the audience is pretty familiar with performance contracts, right? But we have the need for performance contracts, right? The applicability. Over the past several years, we saw a lot of grant activity. We saw just all sorts of some of the different agencies, the EPA, the DOE, all sorts of different grants for decarbonization, electrification. Well, that stuff, of course, has gone in a different direction. But the deferred maintenance needs of the buildings are still there. The systems are still aging, the building envelope. There are, of course, local, both states and local governments jurisdictions where decarbonization mandates are still in place, right? There are sustainability plans, energy efficiency plans, net zero plans, all sorts of things, right? Talking about grants rather, and we don't have the capital. We've got competing budget priorities. Everyone, both in our jobs, in our roles, in our households, stuff has gotten more expensive, and so we've got to balance all these things, right? Performance contracting, energy savings performance contracting, energy performance contracting, guaranteed energy savings performance contracting, whatever skin your state has on the model, has this premise of guaranteed savings provided by third party or private financing with a path to address the operational goals, address the deferred maintenance, address comfort issues. And what we're going to talk about a little more here as we go on, the challenge, of course, is turning the promise of guaranteed savings, of addressed deferred and comfort and operational goals, turning that promise into repeatable results. So what more is a performance contract and what should performance guarantees do? Performance contracting is a design, bid, build capital project implemented by an energy services company or ESCO, energy services provider, ESP, again, depending on what your state calls them. From a contractual perspective, it is this commitment to achieve a net savings. There is a guarantee of performance, guarantee of equipment performance, system performance. What is performance contracting not? It is not a promise that monthly utility bills are always going to go down, right? Measurement and verification is the measurement of avoided consumption, the absence of consumption, not a measurement of savings. And it's a distinction that does make a difference. Performance contracting is it is a path to new equipment, but it is not a risk-free path to new equipment. And of course, it's certainly not this set it and forget it approach to facilities and facilities maintenance. We were talking a little bit before the webinar started. I promised Chris, I'd say I promised him, very interested in the state agency, Georgia Environmental Finance Authority. Chris, your perspective when state agencies are contacting your office, when local governments or schools are contacting your office to say, listen, I had this person come by from ESCO A, they were saying this. What are they saying to you about what the program is?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think certainly people have an understanding of that this can reduce their energy and water consumption, that it can help them get new equipment. I think they mostly understand that. I think oftentimes the perceptions that we deal with that are hardest are around um, they often come to us thinking that it is overly complex and risky and lengthy, and they're just really uncertain about whether or not it's worth pursuing in that sense. One of the other things that we hear is, especially from a state agency standpoint, well, if we do a performance contract, the state just might cut our
Mhm.
maintenance and operations funding, on the back end down the road later at during, the legislative process. There tends to be that kind of hesitancy, I think, around those items. And so we try to spend a lot of time talking through the process, what it looks like. No, we don't have any experience with state agencies, losing funding because they did a performance contract. Um, Explaining to them not just reducing energy and water costs, but look at it as a way to tackle deferred maintenance, equipment issues, operational issues that they're probably going to have to deal with anyways to an extent. And this is another way for them to tackle the financing of that. So we try to make it demystified a little, make it a little bit more simple for them, and then ultimately talk through the risk and how the program is structured and how we can help minimize that. So there's always those concerns about the complexity and the risk.
Sure, certainly. And, some sort of the Department of Energy has been a huge proponent of the use of owners' representatives. Of course, on the federal side, they call it something different because the federal government's special. They are project facilitators, is the term they use. I'm a DOE approved project facilitator. So, one of the roles that folks like me, and there are a number of us out there, we come and provide that demystification, sort of as Chris was just alluding to a little bit, pointing out I say pointing out, monitoring, preparing for mitigating some of common failure modes. And these are pretty text heavy slides on purpose, because I imagine folks are going to want a copy, so wanted to put some good information here. So in the development, as we start thinking about best practices, common pitfalls to avoid, the development of baselines, scopes of work. We see as we are providing, we're a technical reviewer for a number of states and, of course, work directly with owners and agencies as the owner's representative. We see this over optimization of savings. And I want to disclaim this stuff. This is not this we rarely ever see ESCOs doing things, wrong, air quotes wrong. Usually the ESCO is doing the best that it can with the information that it has. Although sometimes in the effort of trying to make some of these assumptions in developing utility and operational cost baselines, things can get overinflated, right? So we assume that the impact of the lighting retrofit is going to have too great an impact on the building heating load, for example. And so our calculations just aren't quite right. Uh, the ESCO is trying to prepare for routine baseline adjustments. Think weather, think occupancy, but there are the non-routine baseline adjustments where the operation of a building just suddenly changes, or there's just a slow drift away from baseline due to loads that weren't prepared for. You have weak documentation sometimes. Again, in our role as technical reviewer, we do see this more than I care to, where there was just this rush to get through, right? On a previous slide, I had the process showing investment grade energy audit, right? It's supposed to be just that, investment grade energy audit. But if we are rushing to develop a scope, maybe we're going to change mechanical systems, but we're not being really clear on what's actually going to happen, how those set points are going to, be managed and controlled over time. And of course, in projects like this, like any project that you have, there's the field reality. Given that the ESCO is providing a performance guarantee on systems and equipment, those systems, that equipment has to be maintained. If proactive operation and maintenance wasn't a industry practice, or excuse me, organizational practice before, it probably won't be afterwards. And so we see, again, common failure modes. Natasha, from the industry perspective, I thinking about baseline scopes. I'm interested in how some of these items hit you. What do members talk about when expressing challenges developing good projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely touched on the top four. I'll say that, when you're going through this process, it's really important to have the right stakeholders at the table, to ensure that you're not, not missing the mark, so to speak. And that could be all the way from, somebody in the facility side, but it could be somebody that's also on the janitorial side, or another group of individuals that might play a role in how the occupancy, changes, or how things arise. And so I would say our members go through a pretty rigorous interview process and really trying to understand how these buildings operate in order to address, things like over optimized savings or even baseline drift.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Staff changes. Let's stay with that and talk about some of the operational and organizational failure modes. I don't like the way that I came up with that phrase now. Anyway, in the slides you get after this, it may say something different, but we see things. There's staff turnover. Folks who learn how to operate the new equipment gone in a couple years, or they're retired or moved on, what have you. In some cases, we can't even get the right people into the training sessions. The technical solutions are going to fail if you don't have organizational buy-in, continuity plans, right? The greatest, most state-of-the-art ECM in the world might be fantastic, but it's not going to work for your agency if your folks aren't trained up and able to make this stuff work. There are, certainly we've seen in many applications where, all right, we're going to adhere to this very rigid personal space heater policy. And then everyone takes them home, we do the project, we leave. Now they all suddenly show back up next winter, and we've got an issue with non-routine adjustments. So we can easily find ourselves overriding our own program without that organizational buy-in. Misalignment of expectations, right? I know, Chris does a great job. There, state energy offices, you're all doing wonderful, but maybe we're not all having the same conversation with the right group all at the same time. So you've got the energy office, the ESCO, the facility manager, the owner, all these different folks with different, responsibilities, trying to do the best they can, defining success perhaps in slightly different terms, which can cause issues with making these projects work well. So in the end, we're going to do a project, we're going to get an M&V report, and it's going to be a lot of information. The best way to do it, when possible, right? You want it to just be very plain language. The International Performance Measurement and Verification Protocol, or IPMVP, it's four common options. Clear data needs, should be rather an independent review of these models, and simple annual reporting, right? I mean, we're not trying to win a Nobel Prize with these M&V reports. It should be very straightforward and easy for anyone to pick up and read and understand. Now, ideally, in ideal scenarios, we've got, every ECM, every building, every big piece of equipment metered. We have interval data coming in from the utility, monthly reconciliations of savings, real-time dashboards. Well, all that stuff costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time, and doesn't end up being what usually goes into these programs. Workable solutions, right? I mean, I hear all the time, stipulated savings are bad. Well, it depends on how you're looking at it, right? So periodic measured savings, lighting being the key example, the most easily understood example of that. It's not an inherently bad way to go. You just need to understand what it is that you're getting, right? Early reviewing the plan, taking deep dives into that early and often is going to help lock in those methods, catch those errors, and just avoid surprises later on down the line. And then the next bullet here, periodic check-ins and adjustments, just having a conversation with the group that's been engaged as the long-term partner for energy efficiency through this program. Um, Chris, I'll kind of pick on you again on the M&V side, right? I mean, so I'm sure Georgia has requirements for what M&V, at least at the base level, needs to look like. I mean, um, are clients and agencies and ESCO expectations aligned when you're seeing these M&V plans?
I think that's one of the more challenging processes as we go through the energy audit process, and we're kind of getting late in the stage of reviewing the documentation, and everyone's pushing towards getting to close and wants to get the deal done, start construction, and you're reviewing the fine details of the M&V plan within the project, and there have been instances where we've got hung up on that before, where facilities, engineers and staff had disagreements with ESCOs about how they wanted to handle a particular part of M&V, which option they wanted to use, or maybe something in the baseline assumptions. And I'll say this actually been one of the areas where an owner's rep has been pretty valuable to us in the past to help us navigate those and represent the state's best interest, and really dig into the data and help essentially kind of negotiate an agreement between an ESCO and the agency and get folks on the same page as far as the details that they need to have in the plan. And we're pretty strict about M&V in Georgia. We expect to get annual reports in our office on all of our projects. We expect, as long as they're still paying the financing on the project, that they're going to do measurement verification. I know it's not like that everywhere. So it's something that we take pretty seriously. And yeah, it's a challenge, and it's good if you don't have folks within your agency that really have deep understanding of how it works. I think bringing in an outside expert is the way to go, and something that we'll probably continue to do here.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I mean, these projects are different, right? I mean, in your more conventional appropriated funds, bid spec work, you don't have this performance guarantee, right? I mean, the equipment's installed, it's commissioned, it's accepted. That is the end of the project, the relationship, right? I mean, obviously the equipment goes into service and has to be taken care of. But in this environment or these types of projects, the project is built does not mean the savings are proven. One consideration is probably a better word, better term than best practice. What I've got here is, as construction implementation of the performance contract, which, think about it, is taking years worth of capital improvements and bundling them into a single procurement, one contract vehicle. So all of this work is happening over 12, 18 months. Maybe construction period measurement and verification activities are part of the project acceptance. So as we are finding discrepancies, hey, this savings isn't working out the way that we thought it was. Maybe we are recalibrating baselines, maybe some programming changes, operational changes are being made to this equipment before we agree on final acceptance and consider like a retainage fee or a retainage payment kind of thing. It's a consideration maybe for making sure, again, performance, energy savings performance happens the way that we thought it would. Natasha, I don't know if well, no, I didn't say I was going to ask you about this one, but I'm curious. You talk to, the ESCO community all the time. How do you think they might respond to something like this?
I mean, it depends. It depends on what the drivers are, right? Chris mentioned that everybody's like trying to get the project closed or trying to get the, acceptance done. But at the end of the day, I think the objective of our members is to, do the right thing. And if something's not right, make sure that we're fixing it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Let's continue on and talk about, we talked about the Georgia program, and, I'm sure there are other states represented here. Some ways that a state program, a strong state program for energy savings performance contracting can reduce risks. Standardized documentation, procurement documents, contract documents, very clear scopes or requirements for an investment grade audit, what constitutes a proper baseline, what is captured in the capital W work, right? What's required for an ECM to be a complete project, and of course, measurement and verification language. More and more states we've seen adopt pre-qualified energy services company or ESCO lists. Chris mentioned Georgia's pre-qualified list and pre-qualified lenders. These are rosters of folks who understand these projects. They have agreed to the terms and conditions in the state's agreements or recommended agreements. They have proven past performance. They've shown they've got the project history. Natasha mentioned very rigorous standards for like NASEO accreditation, which is a commonly carried through requirement for pre-qualification. And even on the owner's rep side, right? I mean, there are folks who say, yes, I'm an engineering firm. I know how to calculate savings. I'm an owner's rep. Well, there are, specific decision points, right? Forks in the road where, your experienced qualified owner's rep is going to know how to explain the risks and allow the agency to make a better decision than folks who maybe haven't seen some of that stuff in the past. Your results there, fewer surprises. Surprises in this space are very bad, as they are in general pretty bad. Local agencies right now, maybe they have more confidence because they know they are working with a pre-qualified firm. They know that there are clear requirements. There is less room for them to be taken advantage of. That's a terrible way because that it happens. It doesn't happen a lot. They know that there's boundaries around the program that they're considering and they're going to go forward with. Now, so workable best practices in the end, what's the desired outcome? We want measurable savings. We want our local governments, we want our state agencies, we want our schools, our universities, we want everyone protected. I think we would love to have, I'm really, really big as an owner's rep, no surprise, right? Really big on transparency. Why aren't we learning lessons from other projects, right? I mean, shining a light on case studies. Natasha's going to talk about a couple case studies here and just but let's build and maintain a healthy market, right? These programs are fantastic ways to get lots and lots of capital improvements installed in a short period of time using offsetting operational costs. Again, operation and maintenance costs, and of course, the energy water savings. Now, in the ideal world, we have perfect data. We all have unlimited budgets and all sorts of time and staff availability and so on. All of our projects align with our requirements. Staff continuity. We have succession plans for every position in the organization. And I'm sort of saying that jokingly. I put that together thinking, what's the most outlandish thing I could think of? It's this list here, the ideal scenario. What's workable though? Having an ESCO that fits the agency. I mean, something that we say all the time is that in general, all of the ESCOs are technically capable of delivering the type of project that you want and need. But which ESCO culturally is a better fit for your team, for your organization? Which ECMs fit best with who you are, who your agency is as an organization, right? I mean, Let's do wind farms everywhere. Well, let's not, because that's not who we are. Um, Workable, realistic M&V is workable, not some very complex, dense report that's never going to get read, but something that is understandable, digestible by uh, uh, city councils, state legislators, school boards. Anyone who cares to look can read this and understand, yes, our project is performing. um, Very clear roles, very clear responsibilities and expectations. I harped on this a bit earlier with the maintaining the equipment, the O&M piece is just so critical to the longevity of the preservation of savings, the longevity of equipment, keeping track of this stuff properly, because oftentimes the performance guarantee is based on it. So if we know what's going into it, if we're planning for the unknown, um, those are workable ways to get good projects. And there are folks out there like me. Again, I'm not the only one. We're not the only owners rep team that are there to help do the best that we can, get something workable that balances risks properly between the ESCO, between the owner, to get closer to good projects and a healthy market. Okay, Natasha, I know you've got a couple case studies, so I'm gonna turn
Well,
it over to
yeah, I
you.
appreciate it. Thanks,
Sure thing.
George. So hello everyone. My name is Natasha Shaw. I'm with the National Association of Energy Service Companies. We're a nonprofit trade association focused on promoting performance contracting, and we do that through policy, advocacy, and education. We've been around since 1983, and we've got about 172 organizations, and I would make a shout out that we do have a public sector membership. So any of you guys that would like to join our organization, we'd love to have you. We could do that through our website. George mentioned this, but we're the home of the only energy service company accreditation. And we've got 40 companies that are accredited right now. Our accreditation process is very involved, and we use the word rigorous, but it is really a rigorous process that vets many of our members who have been doing performance contract for a long time and have substantial proof that they know how to execute these projects. And if you go to our website, you'll also see that we have a list of accredited companies. We're seeing some states look at the accreditation as kind of the milestone for even a qualification process. We've seen some states look at accreditation as a requirement. So we've seen it across the board. Some statistics that we're actually updating right now is that we're averaging about $7 billion in performance contracts across the countries. And so in the last decade, we've done about $70 billion. So I mean, it's a very established program. I wanted to also give a shout out that we have several meetings a year, both regional and national, and we several of the folks on this call have been to our meetings. We would definitely encourage any of the state energy offices to come join us and come talk to us about your energy policies, what you're doing with performance contracting, and we'd love to host you. So that's something we're very interested in doing and continue to do annually. A little bit about my responsibility within the organization. I'm responsible for government affairs and advocacy, and so I would say that 47 out of the 50 states have active legislation around performance contracting. And my job working with our members is to make sure we protect that language and legislation throughout. Um, so, on that note, I am going to share a few case studies. Um, so, Jasmine asked me to focus on some schools. So, this one is one of our members' projects is with Pueblo County School District in Colorado. Oh wait, am I sharing my screen? Am I sharing?
Yes,
Oh, sorry.
we were able to see it.
Okay. I didn't think you could. All right. So This project entails 25 schools in Colorado. Our member company worked with the district on a 15-year master plan on how they can maintain and update all their K through 12 schools. And so one of the phases that they put together was more of a holistic upgrade. So, going in and looking at HVAC, temperature controls, electrical, and several other measures. But I think the key that I wanted to highlight was that they had significant energy savings, and then what they've shared on this particular case study was $679,000 in energy savings, which I thought was fantastic. Um, and they worked with the Colorado Energy Office, which I also thought was very good. Um, the other one I wanted to highlight was around high efficiency geothermal heat pumps with Warren County School District, also 25 schools. They were able to, this is in Kentucky, it's one of the largest and fastest growing districts. They were able to look at high efficiency and leverage the tax credit, the energy tax credit, which resulted in over $1.7 million and saved close to $350,000 with other measures as well, including solar. So, I mean, these are just two projects that I wanted to highlight. You can see that, they worked on the geothermal heat pump and in this picture in their digging process, and obviously had to make some accommodations for it as well. But it's just great to see how successful these projects have been. So, Chris, I am going to turn it back over to you. That's all I wanted to cover. Just a couple of case studies, and then pass it right back to you.
All right. Thank you, Natasha and George. I don't see any questions in the chat yet. Feel free to drop a question in the chat if you have one. In the meantime, a couple things I wanted to talk about. We have a variety of folks on this call from states and I think perhaps local governments and others. And one of the things that I think about a lot and questions that we get are what kinds of government facilities, whether we're thinking state, local, schools, what have you, do you think are best fit for performance contracting? And what kind of facilities might not be an ideal fit for performance contracting? And I'll open up that to either of you.
I can go first,
Sure.
George, because you did cover this a bit. So I would say first and foremost, obviously, I think George mentioned as well, if there's significant deferred maintenance, performance contracting works best with that. If the energy intensity is high, really if multiple buildings can be bundled and honestly it boils down to stable occupancy and operating patterns for sure. I would say it's less effective if buildings are scheduled for closure or the energy use is already optimized, and so there's not a lot of room for savings. So, I would like to say back in the day when lighting was very cost effective, if you went through a massive lighting upgrade and now are like, hey, I want to do a performance contract, you might have not captured those savings. And if the project scope is too small to absorb the transaction costs, so I would say, scale and predictability kind of matter with when doing an ESPC. So George, I didn't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, no, I agree with you, Natasha, 100%. I think something I would add is sometimes overlooked infrastructure is the water wastewater utility, right? So, look, you've got most often the largest utility expenditure of a city county is the water wastewater system watershed what it might be called and so look there these projects tend to be big but they're big needs blowers aeration big motors things like that so yeah water wastewater tends to be a good candidate that they don't always think about this as a priority, but it certainly could be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, Speaking of scale, one of the areas that we've struggled with a little, both within state government and then I think with local governments as well, is uh, what kind of suggestions do you have for smaller entities that want to pursue performance contracts, whether It's a state entity that has a lot of facilities. They're just a lot of really small facilities. Or we're talking smaller local governments that have less facilities, smaller facilities, but have high needs, but maybe don't also have the expertise in-house to navigate as well as a larger entity would. That's something we've been trying to tackle for a long time, both at the state level. I'll give an example, like our state um, technical college system, a lot of small campuses,
Hmm.
trying to roll those up, work across barriers at the institutional level, et cetera. But then, as I mentioned, yeah, smaller local governments as well.
Yeah.
Sure. Natasha,
But
go ahead.
yeah, it's up to you. Yeah, either way, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Chris, yeah, in cases, states, the state energy office is not, they didn't have the legal connection between direct interaction, direct engagement with the local governments. But again, those pre-qualified lists, having set aside technical assistance for these folks, right? I think I had this on one of my slides, that to be able to just helicopter in, give them the support that they need for the stage of the project that they're in. There have been, cooperative purchasing agreements where now your small technical college, small local government, small schools doesn't have to go through the administrative burden. I mean, that can be one of the greatest challenges here. Um, this idea of all of this great work being done in an audit, and you're going to get all this new stuff. Well, you are an active participant in what goes on, and so if you are the mayor and the CFO, things get complicated pretty quickly.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, when you're talking about the resource constrained or even smaller agencies, I mean, I would echo George in um the comment of engaging an owner's representative and getting some help. George is spot on. Cooperative purchasing. A lot of our members, actually all of our members, almost are doing cooperative purchasing with all types of mush market customers, so municipalities, universities, schools, and hospitals. And then I would also say, like, you talked about pre-qualification, but I would add that standardized contract templates are helpful. So, we're seeing like one state work with another state if they've already have an ESPC contract template that they've got in place that they could use, but kind of standardizing that. I would also add that bundling buildings. So if there's an opportunity to bundle to increase the overall effort, if it's across the state, if that's an option to bundle buildings to help offset some of the energy savings. And then Chris, like yourself, I would say partnering with the state energy offices would be another one because I think you guys are obviously a great resource. I would also put in a plug for NASCO as well. If any of you guys need help, we're here to help. We're a resource. We're a small group of people, but we're mighty, and we're happy to help you guys with whatever resources we can provide in helping you guys work through this. And I've gotten calls all the time where like, hey, we're thinking about implementing an ESPC program, where would you start and what would you do? And so we're happy to help with that as well.
Yeah, sure. And in addition to cooperative purchasing, I mean, look, if you are a county that plays well with your anchor city and your school system and you're all one big happy family, maybe we get a really good attractive program. We attract the ESCO community to come in because now we've got all of this infrastructure bundled together and we are really capturing the economy of scale on mobilization, development costs, equipment cost, installation, just these kinds of things. So something to consider. In some cases that might work well. In some cases it doesn't work so well. But again, just another option.
Right, that makes sense. Uh, Since this is a NASEO call and NASEO's target audience is state energy offices, I want to ask a question specifically from a kind of broad state energy office perspective. Some state energy offices have very robust performance contracting programs with a lot of structure in place, a lot of support and resources. I would say probably the majority aren't at that level. If someone is out there sitting in a state energy office that hasn't had a big role in performance contracting, maybe doesn't have a a legislative mandate to be involved in it, but is thinking, I think this is important. I think this can do good things in my state. I want to improve the uptake of performance contracts in XYZ state. What kind of one or two pieces of advice would both of you have for that kind of state that wants to move the needle on this, but hasn't historically had a strong program or a strong presence in performance contracting in their state?
So I would like to chime in, George, if it's okay with you. A couple things. We were recently in New Orleans for one of our regional meetings, and we had the State Energy Office of Mississippi come and speak to us, and they talked about their energy program, which I thought this was fantastic. They actually invited all the ESCOs to come in, all the energy service companies come in. They invited any of the local government and state folks that want to attend, and they talked about how they could build their program and how they could leverage best practices. Now, they're not new, but this is something they're trying to invigorate, as well. And it was really well received across the board. Having that partnership and engagement between public and private sector. So I would think that would be an idea, is bring everyone in and talk about how we could create a program. There are organizations that do public-private partnerships. And NASCO would be happy to help facilitate that and take a lead role in bringing industry together and trying to figure out how to best leverage putting a program together. So I would say that as well. Those are the two things that come to my mind. Is leveraging, the resources that are out there in our industry, and we're definitely one of them. So we would definitely encourage that.
Yeah, and I mean, Chris, I would say, I mean, similar to other programs that the state energy office is interested in getting up off the ground. It's a lot of education, right? I mean, you have, as you just mentioned, you have states that have robust programs. They have, revolving loan style programs, contracts where the office is the resource and folks are coming to them and projects are being done, and the state is, recycling its own revenue through these projects. So putting together business cases, working with your peers and others in other energy offices, what's going well for them, how do they present this to, um, be it, the governor's office or the legislature, to get some action here. um, showing what's possible, and then, look, competition. Hey, our neighboring state is really just making us look foolish with all the projects that they've done, and we're not doing much. What can we do to, you know what can we do to beat the competition here? I mean, it seems to work well for us in college football as a nation. Why not try it on other industry stuff as well?
Yeah, point taken. Um, well, we have another one question in the comments I just want to address from Michael Lynn, and that's, what does the contracting process typically look like from beginning to end? RFQs, RFPs, question mark. I mean, really good question, and I'll take a quick stab at that, but then I'll also say, reach out to NASEO, to NASCO, other state energy offices, and we can talk through that in much more detail. It's a lengthy process. Generally, it's definitely a lengthy process for us in Georgia. We have a RFP process, and then there's the lengthy investment grade audit process, and then there's some amount of time after that to get the financing in place and get the deal over the finish line and start construction. Oftentimes for us, as George well knows, it can take a year or over a year to work our way through all of that. I think different jurisdictions are going to do that differently, and it's going to look differently. But it is lengthy. An investment grade audit can take anywhere from probably a few months minimum to 6 months or more, depending on how big of facilities you're looking at. I think most people who work in government know that government RFPs can take some amount of months to get through. So it's lengthy. We have that RFQ to audit to financing to close process in place pretty well planned out. But yeah, it's long, but we can certainly other folks on this call can get you more info on that, Michael. So with that, we've got 3 minutes left. I just want to offer a chance for George or Natasha or Jasmine to offer any final words before we kick off for the day.
Well, I would just add one thing. In my experience working on performance contracting, I always found that, the agencies that work best always identified a project champion or somebody that could work up and down within an organization. And within the organization, I mean the agency, having the buy-in of leadership all the way down to the folks in the boiler room is really important in order for these projects to work. And having that buy-in and agreement and excitement and having the person kind of run point, we always found a very successful model. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. I mean, some a takeaway, like anything else, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Yes, these projects can be complicated, they can be a bit daunting, but we are not doing brain surgery, right? So um, there are tons and tons of resources out there. I know sometimes that can lend itself to analysis paralysis, but I think Natasha's spot on, right? Identify a project champion. Don't let that individual get pulled into 6, 7 different projects while trying to manage this one. And just build a plan. Try to see into the future if you can for what's going to happen, when you expect to be where, and things will work out as long as you're paying attention and you're given the time and space to do your part.
Thank you. Jasmine, any last words?
No, outside of thanking you all, Chris, George, and Natasha for sharing so many insights that I think are valuable to everybody, no matter where they are, kind of on that ESPC adoption scale. And want to appreciate everybody for attending today. All the slides and the recording of this presentation will be shared around with all registrants, including you all attendees. So thank you all so much for your attention and interest today. And thank you again to our panelists for a great discussion.
Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
take it easy.